Hello readers, I'm the Avid reader, and today I'm gonna recommend you 5 economics books that you should read. So as some of you may know, I think that economics is central to understanding the world. So I've read several economics books, and if you're interested in the subject and wanna get into it, then these are some good starters in my opinion. The first economics book you should check out is Economics in One Lesson by Henry Hazlitt. Henry Hazlitt has written some of the best economics books ever. He writes in such a clear way and he helps you understand economic principles in one main lesson, which is basically one policy leads to results in the short run that you see, but you don't see the long run consequences for everyone else. And there are short chapters on a lot of different economic topics in this book. So the perfect starter if you're getting into economics. It's a short book in big letters, a couple hundred pages. Now if you want a more in-depth introduction to economics, then I would recommend you to check out Basic Economics by Thomas Sowell. Now this is a chunker, over 600 pages, and although it's a thorough dive into economics, it's written in simple English. It doesn't use a bunch of graphs or complicated numbers, so even if it's quite detailed, it's pretty easy to understand nonetheless. Here you also learn about the central principle of scarcity, where resources have alternative uses. So the central lesson of this book overall is that you spend money on one thing, then you're gonna have less money left over to another thing, which may have been a more efficient way to spend money. So there are trade-offs. That's an important message of Thomas Sowell overall, trade-offs. Another economics book you should read is also by Thomas Sowell. It's Economic Facts and Fallacies. And this is a short book, slightly over a couple hundred pages. But this book basically debunks a lot of fallacies you hear in the media or in history or overall in academia regularly. And it's mainly debunking inequality statistics, but it also debunks a bunch of fallacies about urban planning, and it delves into the truth about income inequality, racial inequality, inequality between the first and the third world, male-female inequality, so the wage gap. So once you read this book, you're gonna realize that a lot of the non-fiction you read, or even some of the fiction, a lot of the arguments that are built up by a lot of intellectuals or authors are based on economic fallacies, and you also get the facts in response to these fallacies. And one such economic fallacy, for example, is the myth that you've had economic stagnation for the middle class in America. No, the problem is that the statistic measures categories and not people. If you look at people, then you can see that there has been a lot of social mobility. So a great economic scrutiny of statistics. The next economics book you should check out is by Milton Friedman, Capitalism and Freedom. So this is another short book, a couple hundred pages or so. And this is a great introduction to Chicago economics overall. So here you understand Milton Friedman's argument for freedom and the connection between economic freedom and political freedom, and how government regulation screws things up often. And you also get proper explanations for what the proper role of government is, relating to the neighborhood effect, what welfare policies we can have, and what monetary policy we maybe should have. I don't agree completely necessarily with this book, but it's a perfect introduction to at least Chicago economics. And of course, Economics in One Lesson is a perfect introduction to Austrian economics. And the final economics book you should check out is The Failure of the New Economics by Henry Hazlitt. So you may have noticed in my economic book recommendations that I've only basically mentioned Austrian or Chicago economists. That's because I embrace neoclassical economics and I wholeheartedly reject Keynesian and Marxist economics. This book is a perfect takedown of Keynesian economics, as the subtitle here is An Analysis of the Keynesian Fallacies. So this book goes deep into why the general theory of Keynes is wrong, how it's built upon contradictions that Keynes has in his definitions, and how he uses a bunch of equations without well explaining them or developing them, that it's very hard to understand the general theory when you actually read it. I've read Keynes's book and it's painful to read, but this book simplifies what the general theory actually means and also debunks it. It doesn't just look at the general theory of Keynes, although it principally does so. It also looks at a couple of other Keynesian books by John Maynard Keynes. And although it's 400 pages, it is easy to understand and written in simple English. So I've noticed that among all the economists I have read, Henry Hazlitt writes in the best proper simple English for a layman to understand. So if you want to understand why left-wing economics don't make any sense and that they're based on a bunch of contradictions, then this is the perfect book to check out. The Failure of the New Economics by Henry Hazlitt. And those were 5 economics books you should check out, especially if you're interested in neoclassical economics or Chicago or Austrian economics. These are all easy economics reads. I've read some other economics books that are hard reads which use weird English written by people whose primary language is German, so they don't write English in a legible way for laymen. But these authors do so. These are all American authors who write very well nonfiction. And if you're interested in learning more about economics, then I would recommend you to check out this playlist about economics books that I've reviewed. And here I do cover some of these authors such as Thomas Sowell, Milton Friedman, and Henry Hazlitt. Anyways, I'm the Avid Reader, and I will see you readers next time.